In any high-stakes competition, there are these moments, these tiny windows of opportunity where everything just hangs in the balance. And whoever seizes that moment wins. It's not about brute force. It's about something way more elegant. So, what does it really mean to master timing? Well, it all starts with understanding the edge.
And that's exactly how the best players in the world describe it. It's such a powerful metaphor for this razor-thin margin of error, right? If you move too soon, you hit solid ground when you were expecting a weak spot. But if you move too late, you fall right into the trap you were trying to set. The real art is in knowing exactly where that edge is.
So what is this cliff's edge in practice? I mean, it's not some landmark on the battlefield. It's a fleeting moment, this really precise window where the momentum of the entire game can just flip on a dime. And this strategy, it's called a timing attack. It's all about hitting your opponent when they're at their weakest to get the biggest impact. It's not about who has the bigger army overall. It's about who is stronger in that exact second, all based on the choices each of you just made.
Okay, so how do you find these moments? These little pockets of maximum advantage. Well, it all comes down to a really simple but kind of profound economic principle that basically governs the entire game.
And there it is. That's the core logic. You strike right in that gap between your opponent's investment and their return on it. In that little window, your opponent has paid for a future that hasn't arrived yet, and that leaves them totally vulnerable in the present.
Okay, let's take a classic example. A player decides to expand their territory, so they build a new base. That's going to cost them 400 minerals, which are instantly gone from their bank. That's a huge investment, money that could have been spent on troops or defenses.
This timeline shows you exactly how that weakness is created. At point 1, they make the investment. Way over at point 3, the benefit finally kicks in. But just look at point 2. That's the window. For a whole minute, those 400 minerals are just gone. They're not soldiers, they're not earning any more money. They're just gone. So here's the crucial thing to understand. This isn't a gut feeling or a guess. Your opponent is quantifiably, mathematically weaker than they were a minute ago and weaker than they're going to be a minute from now. Their investment in the future created a real weakness in the present. That is your moment to strike.
So if the logic is that simple, you might be asking, why doesn't everybody just do this perfectly all the time? Well, because seeing the window is one thing. Actually hitting it, that's another thing entirely.
In a real, fast-paced game, that perfect window of opportunity might only be open for, say, 15 to 30 seconds. And that's nothing. It's just enough time to make your move, but there's absolutely zero room for hesitation or for any mistakes. And there are two ways to fall right off this cliff. If you strike too early, well, your opponent hasn't spent the money yet. They'll just meet you with their full strength. But if you strike too late, that investment you were supposed to punish is now the very thing that crushes you. The new base is funding their army, the new tech is on the field.
And this is exactly why the best players aren't just fast, they're incredibly perceptive. They're not just watching a timer, they are reading the game. They're scouting their opponent's choices, they're understanding the strategy, and they're intuiting that precise moment their opponent has committed to a path they just can't back out of.
So, how does this actually play out in a real match? Well, elite players, they don't just sit around and wait for these windows to appear. They actually engineer them from the very first moments of the game, crafting their whole strategy to create and exploit these exact moments.
So let's look at two legendary examples. First, a classic army transition that creates a moment of total vulnerability. And second, a hyper-specific, mathematically precise attack designed by one of the greatest players to ever touch the game.
Okay, so in our first case, the Zerg player decides to switch their army from flying mutalisks to burrowing lurkers. This means they have to spend a ton of resources on an upgrade and morph their units. So during that transition, their powerful air force is gone, but their deadly ground force hasn't shown up yet. The perfect analogy for this? It's like hitting an army that's in the middle of surgery. I mean, it is completely exposed. A well-timed Terran push doesn't find an army ready for a fight, it finds a bunch of units that are literally transforming, totally unable to fight back effectively.
Now for our second case, the legendary Flash build. The beauty of this one is just in the raw math. While the original build was famously with Marines, this chart using Goliaths shows the exact same principle. Just look at the shots needed to kill a Protoss interceptor. At +0 and +1 attack, it takes 6 shots. But at +2, something magical happens.
It drops to 5 shots. And that one-shot difference, it's not a small thing, it is a monumental shift in how effective your army is.
The entire timing of the build is engineered to have that +2 upgrade finish and hit the Protoss player before they can get their own armor upgrade, which would cancel out the advantage. It's a timing attack based entirely on a single, crucial breakpoint in the game's math.
So after all this, the theory, the execution, the examples, what's the big takeaway here? What's the secret to winning not just with force, but with finesse?
It's really not just about speed or having more stuff. It's about understanding the fundamental rhythm of the game, that natural cycle of spending, waiting, and benefiting that every single player has to go through. Mastery is about feeling that rhythm and knowing exactly when to interrupt your opponent's flow. Ultimately, this is the lesson, right? An opponent with a bigger bank and a bigger army can still lose if you strike when their money's tied up, their army's in transition, or their new tech isn't quite online yet. You make what you have count for way more than what they have.
And that brings us right back to where we started. That vulnerable moment, that gap between the investment and the return, that is the cliff edge. The masters of the game, they find it, they walk right up to the last possible inch, and then they push.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, from business to sports, even personal relationships, how many big moments are won not by the person with the most power, but by the person who knew exactly when to make their move?